You've got questions, we've got answers. Welcome to the Therapist Question Box, where trauma-trained therapists tackle real questions from real people. I'm your host, Lindsay Schiss, bringing you grounded insights you can actually use, brought to you by Therapy Utah. Welcome back to another episode of the Therapist Question Box. We are here to answer your mental health questions. Any question you have, we want to hear from you. That's what makes this content rich, is we are hearing from the listener about what your concerns are in terms of mental health relationships. So write us and let us know. Today I have with me Elizabeth Hendricks. Elizabeth, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Elizabeth is a professor at UVU and has done a lot of work with the immigrant population. Mm-hmm. Elizabeth, tell us a little bit about you before we launch in.
Yeah, so like you said, I'm a professor at Utah Valley University, social worker by education and also by conviction.
Yes.
I got my BSW, 20 years ago, and just kind of kept on plugging away. I did some work in international development and then got my master's degree in social work and ended up working with refugees and immigrants, like you mentioned, and then also working with survivors of trafficking. And so the question that we're going to talk about today is it's one that's close to my heart, and
which is why we had you on.
Yes. But when I'm not doing those things, I've got 4 kids, 10 and down, and so I spend a lot of my time kind of chasing after them. And it's summertime, so we're having a blast, and love the outdoors and hiking and being with people that I love, which, as we kind of get into our conversation today, I think you'll see that a lot of those things are not just for fun. They're actually critical to being able to do important work.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And you're not from Utah. Where are you from?
I am from Oklahoma originally. Yeah, Tulsa, Oklahoma.
I love it. And been here how long?
Been here 14 years,
okay.
I think. But every season brings something new. So as as my kids are getting older, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm experiencing Utah in a different way or a different kind of part of it. Oh, I need to know kid activities now instead of whatever young
baby
married
toddlers,
activities.
Yes,
exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Of course.
The question we had you come in today because this is a question that you study about. It's been your research, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we're really lucky to have Elizabeth here to talk about this subject. So we'll dive right in. The question is, I care deeply about people and the problems in the world, but lately I feel emotionally exhausted and powerless. How do I stay compassionate and make a difference without burning myself out?
Mm-hmm.
I think this listener put words to what a lot of people are feeling.
Yeah.
That they want to help, but it feels so overwhelming.
Yes.
Would you agree that this is a common thing you're seeing?
Yeah, I do think so. And, I sort of resonate with this both personally and professionally. I think I have felt this and sometimes do feel this. And also in my interactions with, with students in particular, I'm thinking often I am introducing them to new things that are wrong in the world. And that's not always the most fun position to be in. So I spend a lot of time thinking about this, like how can I help students cultivate an awareness and an engagement with the world around them while also preserving that sense of like self-efficacy, right? I can actually do things in the world. I actually can make a difference, right? How do we look at everything that's going on in the world around us and not freeze?
Yes. I love that you said that, because as a student, when I was a student, I remember thinking, these are things I have never thought about. I have never looked at the world in this way. And when I went through social work school, right, and I got my graduate degree, I think I love what you said, that you want them to be aware of it, but then also still have that self-efficacy and understand, like, okay, we have to still take care of self.
Yeah.
So I know it's really broad, but I would love for you to talk about when we hear this, I think about compassion fatigue, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So tell me about compassion fatigue, and as a person in the helping profession, how do we avoid compassion fatigue? And those of us that are not in helping professions, I mean, there's a lot of listeners that are not, and I'm sure they still feel compassion fatigue, right? Maybe in the walls of their own home, we could feel it. So I would like you to speak a little bit to that, you know, people that are feeling burdened, wanting to be compassionate, that's where their heart is. You said, I'm a social worker. That's my heart. That's my trade. I think a lot of people feel that. That's what they want to do, but they're exhausted.
Yes, that's exactly right. So compassion fatigue, if you know, if folks are unfamiliar with the term, this is a term that it was popularized by Charles Figley, and he called it the cost of caring. And the idea is that we are empathically engaged with, you know, people we care for and we care about. And in particular, you know, he was looking at this in healthcare settings, but we see similar kind of lines of thinking and ideas like this popping up in other places. Like vicarious trauma was really stemmed from work with trauma therapists. And so the ideas are that here are people who are day in, day out, empathically engaging with people in sort of this helping role, and that ultimately they start to take on some of the weight of not just the caregiving, but of the experience that the other person is going through. And compassion fatigue is linked to burnout. It's not the same thing exactly, but there's a lot of overlap between compassion fatigue and burnout. And I can kind of walk through, if it's helpful, these different ideas and differentiate. But really the heart of compassion fatigue is the cost of caring has become so high that I find physiologically and psychologically, in the places where I am motivated to show up, I am motivated to help, I reach for it and I just can't. It's just not available to me. And that's particularly hard because the people who experience things like compassion fatigue are people who have often chosen to be in helping roles, right?
Absolutely.
So it's even harder because you feel like this is who I am. These things are so important to me to show up, maybe professionally, but, you know, maybe caring for a spouse or a child or an aging parent, you know, for somebody who is going through cancer treatment, for somebody who is going through divorce or some other type of loss, right? Like when we are trying to show up for them and find that the helping person that we want to be is not actually available to us in those times. And that's really, really difficult.
Well, it's hard because that's part of who you are, right? Like that's a value of mine. It's why I went into this profession. Yes. But for those that are not in the profession as well, like this is who I am. This is something I love and something that matters. Yes. And when I don't have it in me, that feels really confusing. Yes. In fact, just last week, I finished a day with a lot of clients and I finished and I thought, okay, I've got 1 hour and I was getting ready for a keynote presentation. And so I wanted to go through a few things. And honestly, like I had nothing. I had no gas in the tank. I didn't have any creative energy. And I started and I thought, what is wrong with me? And I thought, I knew that I had a heavy day working with people dealing with trauma. Yes. And that I didn't have any more to give. Yes. And I knew what was going on. So I could kind of say, you know what? Turns out you're not going to work on your keynote presentation. You are going to go ahead and go home. Yes. You're done. You're done for the day.
And good for you.
And good for me. That's right. But I will say I go home and sometimes I also have that feeling that I'm like, I don't want to talk to anyone about an emotional, like any emotional problem, any emotion, nothing, right? Yes. So for those of us that are, again, in helping professions or not, what would you suggest when you're like, yeah, there is no gas in the tank, but there's still demands on us to give emotionally?
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think it really depends on what the situation is, right? So sometimes we're thinking this is, in this moment, I don't have gas in the tank. So what can I do in this moment? And also, recognize like how much is enough, right? You've probably heard the phrase like, don't let the best be the enemy of good, right?
Yes.
And I think sometimes we get caught up in like, if I can't bring my absolute best, then it's not worth it. But sometimes good enough is good enough, right? But also there are times when we know that we are not going to be able to show. I know I needed a change for myself when I was like, I'm coming home and I have nothing left to give my kids, not occasionally, but consistently. And I was like, this is not right. This is not the parent I want to be. This is not the life that I want for myself, but also, you know, for my family. And so I ended up moving out of direct community practice and moving into an academic role because chronically I was finding that there was not gas in the tank. So I think in those moments when you're like, oh, in this moment it's not available, then there are certainly things that we can do, right? I have, you know, people I can call that really recharge me. I have, you know, my sister the other day, I was kind of dealing with some stuff and she was like, would you like me to send you a series of unrelated memes that are going to make you laugh? And I was like, I would.
Yes,
I would. Right.
That.
She didn't talk me through the stuff that was going on. That was not where I was. And she knew it. Right. She was like, I'm going to send you these, you know.
I actually love that.
Yes.
Like
yes.
If it's the cat video or the babies or whatever it is, like you just need some brainless, mindless things to just distract yourself for a moment, right?
Just for a moment, right? And we don't want to, you know, we're not numbing, we're not, right? Like, we're just like, okay, what is it that can give me just enough to meet what I have, you know, what's waiting for me? And then if this is something that's a pattern, then I need to develop a deeper practice of, I'm going to say the word self-care, and I have a lot of feelings about this, but we have to develop a deeper practice of, I'm going to amend that and say, taking care of ourselves, right? Self-care, I think, has gotten a little bit, you know, bruised and battered as it showed up in pop psychology. And it's really become equated with, like, you know, put on a face mask and do a little me time. And, you know, there are a lot of aspects of self-care that are not actually an option for many people. And so there was a study done a while back that listed all these things about, you know, kind of the most effective self-care behaviors. And as it turns out, they were most highly correlated with other measures of privilege.
Yes.
So it was like, you know, go to, like, you know, a fitness class or yoga or take a walk. And these things require childcare or a second parent to help care for kids, or a neighborhood that you feel safe walking through at night on your own, or a membership to a gym, right? So all these things kind of take resources, take additional sort of structures that aren't available to everybody. Yeah. So anyway, that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
But self-care, I think, let's come back to it, because I want to
say
spend a lot of time on that.
I actually want to talk about that really quickly, because I think sometimes we get in the mode that self-care is this, like, position of privilege. And it definitely, I think pop culture says it is.
Yes.
But I also believe that self-care is like good time management.
Yes.
Saying, you know what, this is what I have time to do, and
Yes.
I'm actually going to be boundaried in that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to prioritize my sleep.
Yes.
And I'm going to prioritize eating well. And I'm
Yes.
going to prioritize sunshine.
Yes.
Like, that can happen to anybody, right?
Yes.
And we don't have to be we can do those things if we,
Yes.
again, go, this is what feels regulating to me. And we know studies have shown, like, those are the basic needs,
things,
right?
yes.
And it's funny how actually we lack those a lot of the time. I mean, we lack sleep, we lack good nutrition, we lack getting outside and being in nature. Like, we lack those things.
Yes.
And so if we can get back to some of those basics, actually,
Absolutely.
that's where we can start that baseline.
That's exactly right. And you're reminding me, I'm going to pause and take a sip of my water.
You're okay. But I think, again, one of the thoughts I had too is that the understanding that self-care actually can look like watching a few memes.
Yes.
and laughing.
Yes.
Like, at the end of the day, just saying, oh my gosh, that's different than numbing.
Yes.
And just, you know, scrolling endlessly and recognizing the difference between the two.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's why I kind of changed that wording from self-care to taking care of yourself, because I think in some ways that term self-care has lost its real meaning.
Yes.
Right. And it does start to turn into kind of like TikTok self-care. And these things aren't bad, right? But they can't be the whole thing, right?
That's
and
right.
the reality is, like, tending to your own needs and eating eating healthy, and it doesn't. And there are ways. I'm so glad you brought that up. There really are ways to do these regardless of what our circumstances are, right? Like you don't have to get an organic salad. Frozen vegetables are just as healthy, right? Like these
you
things that are like,
yes,
you can do these kind of
reason.
regardless of situation. But I think that I have found, I'll tell a story where I learned some humility. In a moment, I was working, I had a case manager. She was really going through some difficulty personally as well as with a client. And I made the comment like, could you why don't you just pause? Like, let's take a moment, maybe wrap up the day a little early, take a bath, something like that, right? Something that'll kind of help you feel calm. And she was like, I live in a studio apartment. Like, I don't have a bathtub. And that was such a moment for me of, as a supervisor, but also just as a person in the world, like, okay, I can't tell people to take care of themselves in a really narrow way, right? I have to really think about like what is available to the people around me and what is what's going to be the most helpful for them, and also within kind of the constraints. But same for me, right? If someone says yoga's so great for your mental health, which it is, and I say, well, that's not something that I can do, that doesn't mean that I shouldn't pursue anything in that arena at all, right? Like I can turn on a YouTube video and I can do a little yoga in my living room, right? And again, this is maybe best being the enemy of good,
right?
Yes. But I think there's a bit of a mental block there too, because I was reading a study recently about folks who feel guilty around self-care behaviors or prioritizing their own needs. That's really associated with folks who feel the most sort of guilt or most heavily endorse statements that like, I feel bad if I prioritize other people's needs over my own. They also experience the highest amounts of secondary traumatic stress and vicarious trauma, which I think is really interesting, because then it becomes this vicious cycle where you think, I'm feeling these things on other people's behalf so deeply, I don't have any right to enjoy these things, to take care of myself, right? And then we find that in that we take away from our ability to then help other people, right? So it's
like a nasty circle, right? That's like
bad.
A cycle.
It's real.
Yeah.
It's real bad. And for listeners who are maybe less familiar with secondary traumatic stress, I'd love to just spend a moment on that, because I think it's something that's really important for us to name and understand. There's a lot of overlap. Sometimes they're used interchangeably. Vicarious trauma and secondary traumatic stress, they're not exactly the same, but secondary traumatic stress is this actually beautiful thing. It is that our bodies and brains are so good at empathy that we recruit the same center. So if you're telling me something that happened to you, and I'm listening and I'm empathically engaged, right? Like I'm here with you. We can do two types of empathy. We can do cognitive empathy, which is I understand where you're coming from. And we can do emotional empathy, which is I feel your pain. And as it turns out, based on like fMRIs, functional MRIs, I can literally feel your pain. So when my brain is engaged in emotional empathy and I am listening to this thing that happened to you that you're telling me about, an experience that you had, my brain, it's so like wonderful and such a testament to human connection, but my brain is recruiting the pain center. It's recruiting the fear center, as though like it wants to be there with you, right? Which is
It's incredible.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's actually so beautiful and amazing. And also, if you are not the person who, with the direct lived experience, you don't get to be the one who makes the meaning of the trauma or who finds their way out of it. So if you're a person who's consistently, chronically, empathically engaged with people, and your brain is doing this beautiful thing of like mirroring, and I'm doing the thing, I'm understanding or I'm experiencing in my body the thing that you experienced, and then I don't also experience the resilience or the resolution, right, that you are experiencing, then I can get stuck in that place. And so a lot of this is an experience that actually is somewhat common in helping professionals, is they will actually experience the same symptoms as like PTSD. They'll have intrusive thoughts. They'll have that hyper arousal or hyper vigilance, and avoidance based on other people's experiences, not their own experiences. And so the way kind of through that, I think it's so important, right, to name that and recognize that. And this is a piece of compassion fatigue. I think that this is something that we used to really specifically see in trauma therapists, in healthcare professionals, in people who are in these high exposure professions, right? Where they're seeing a lot of people who are going through really difficult things. Looking back at this listener question here, what I'm thinking is there used to be distance, right? There used to be distance between people who are going through difficult things and a person living their life, right? Based on the ways we get information now, like how many times we pick up our screens every day, the sheer amount of information that is coming toward us, everything is proximal, right? Everything is in front of us.
And we were not meant to process that way.
No, we
never.
Cannot.
No.
Cannot. Cognitively, neurologically, physiologically, we cannot process that much at once, right? And so where this may have been a conversation that, 20 years ago we were having with people who are in, quote, high trauma exposure, we said it was an occupational hazard, right? And I don't think it's just an occupational hazard anymore, because now you can just open up your phone and see live footage of the aftermath of earthquakes and, things that are going on in people's lives individually and societally. And if you're a person who cares, which I'd like to believe that most people are, right? And you continue to take those things on, right? You're experiencing that secondary traumatic stress, maybe you're experiencing this compassion fatigue, and ultimately experiencing burnout, that sense of like, I just can't do this cynicism, kind of distancing, a sense that I really, it's hopeless, right? I really can't make a difference. And that's the piece that I think, these other things, they're really difficult to deal with, but the burnout is the real tragedy, because we start to believe that what we do doesn't matter, and that our efforts don't make a difference. And I think there's some real kind of cognitive and moral dissonance that happens there within people who are kind of wired toward helping, but also it's just a really difficult place to be, right? A really difficult thing to feel, like things I care about around me are happening, and nothing I do will help.
Well, and I think it's nothing I do will help, and I feel exhausted when I'm doing it. So what's the benefit? What am I even here to do, right? What am I doing?
Yeah.
So what would you say, we've talked about, you've given us such good information around what it is, why it happens, why our world is bombarding us with it.
Yes.
So what do we do?
Yeah.
Like, what do we do? We know ways of self-care,
Yeah.
right? We're not going to say self-care, but caring for self.
Care for oneself.
Care for oneself that
yes.
feels a little bit better.
Yeah.
But what else would you suggest people can do when they feel that overwhelmed? And I'll back up a little bit, but when I'm with my students, one of the things I will say too is they will learn all these things, like you were saying, your students as well. And it honestly feels overwhelming because they want to solve everything.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
They're in the profession because they are helpers. That's their heart. That's who they are. And so the idea of hearing all these problems, they're like, I don't even know where to begin. I'm overwhelmed. I don't know where to start. And I will often just say, start where you are. Like whatever, lift where you stand.
Yes.
And because being overwhelmed does nothing.
Yes.
Because then we don't move the needle at all. But if we lift where we stand just in the realm of where you are, that matters.
Yes.
So I'm curious, in addition to that, what you would suggest.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, I think something for me that has been something that has really helped me both personally and professionally is the recognition that when we're talking about big things going on in the world, we're probably not going to see resolution. we're not going to see full resolution. We're not going to see things coming together on a community or societal or global scale in the way that we think they should, right? And this idea that we're going to be inching toward it, but we are not going to get to the finish line. This does not mean we don't work, right? Like, not at all. Don't get me wrong. What it means is that we really have to find joy and meaning in the work itself. It has to be fun. It has to involve human connection. It has to be fulfilling itself, right?
In the process. Not just the outcome.
Yes. And so our joy around it can't just be linked to a particular outcome. It has to be found in the work itself. And so sometimes that means, I had a friend who invited a group of us over for postcard writing and cookies. And I was like, yes, this is something I can do, right? It's fun and it's also meaningful, right? It's taking action, but in a way that doesn't just take out of me, but also fills me up.
Yeah, because you're connecting.
Yes.
And you're with your people and
Exactly.
you're enjoying a cookie.
That's
and,
exactly
yes.
right. Yes.
Yeah.
And there is joy in that. And finding people that also care about the same things as you. Something that I've loved to discover is that I'm almost never the first person to think about an issue, right? Someone else is already thinking about it. Someone else actually, this is what gets them out of bed every morning. And I used to, when I was a little baby social worker, be like, how could people care so deeply about this thing when obviously this is the most important thing, right? My number one issue is the most important issue. And as I have matured, I've actually come to see that as such a gift, that there is something that lights a fire under somebody else that I think is really, it's important, but it's not the thing that gets me out of bed every morning. And you know what? We need all of those people.
Absolutely.
Every single one of those people, right? The person that is going to bat in the education realm, the person that is going to bat in domestic violence and sexual assault realms, right? Like the person that's going to bat in refugee and immigrant issues, right? We need people who every morning they wake up, disability issues, all right. This is the thing that drives them, so that I can say, I can't hold. There's this great model of that we use in macro social work that is knowledge plus noise. And it's like, this is how we create change on a macro scale. It's knowledge plus noise. And I think something really beautiful about this model is that they recognize, this is from Just Associates, they recognize that you can't always be the person with the knowledge and you can't always be the person who makes the noise. And recognizing that, like, sometimes you're only in a position to be on a mailing list. And when someone says, do this thing, you do that thing, right? Sometimes you're the person who can do research and inform, but based on your position or what your life demands of you, like, you can't be the one who is making the noise. You can only be the one who's collecting the knowledge. And so I think, to your point, kind of lift where you're standing, right? Lift where you are, that recognizing that what is available to you is enough.
Yes.
Sometimes too, and giving ourselves compassion in that. Like, no one can do everything all the time.
And in fact, we shouldn't, no one's requiring that of us, right? No one's saying we need to do that, but us giving ourselves compassion and saying, this is what I can do.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting too, because you're saying, knowledge versus noise.
Yeah.
And I would also say, we all have different gifts.
Yes.
Your gifts are different than mine. And so I'm going to lift where I stand in ways that fuel my soul and that are combined with my gifts.
Absolutely.
And the same with you. And I think we can look and say, well, that person's doing this and that person's, and it's like, no, you're doing exactly, hopefully, what you're meant to be doing.
Right.
And if it doesn't feel aligned,
Yeah.
then get curious about that and see where you can get more congruent with what feels like purpose for you.
Yes.
And I think, whether it is social activism, as you were talking, or whether it is within the walls of your own home, like, what does that look like for you? And honor that.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we go, oh, I'm not enough of this and I need to be more of that. Well, what if we were to say, this is exactly where I'm at right now, and it feels aligned.
Yeah.
And you know what? My seasons will change.
Yes.
And life will change.
Yes.
And I can adapt when that happens.
That's exactly right. And I'm actually so glad you brought up that word seasons. That's something that I really love. And I even wrote down in my notes.
Nice.
Just embracing the seasonality of who we are and what our life looks like and what type of, what kind of helping and compassion can we have towards the world at any given season. So, for me, I mentioned at the beginning of our time that, I've got 4 pretty young kids, and this is my garden right now. Right. And even I think we can use that metaphor literally. Like, I stopped trying to plant a garden because it
didn't work out.
Right. It didn't work out. And the reality is, like, it's because I have other priorities.
That's
and
right.
my other priorities are my children, right? My metaphorical garden, not my literal garden.
Yeah.
And so I think recognizing that, like, there is a seasonality to it, that the people I come in contact with right now are different than the people I came in contact with when I was a young professional, no kids. And as I move into different seasons of life and different places and different roles, it's going to look different for me, and giving myself permission to say, like, hey, you're not going to be doing the same things as you were 20 years ago.
And congratulations, because
yes.
that means you're growing and
Right.
evolving, right?
That's right. That's
Yes.
exactly right. And
Yes.
that things will change, and things should change. And
That's
so,
right.
yeah, to your point, being in tune, being aligned with what your life looks like now and how you can kind of engage in whatever that kind of helping and change effort, whatever that looks like now, and recognizing that, that this is going to change over time, and that nothing is forever, right? So we might hold on to some things now or say goodbye to some things now, but it's not forever, right? And we can always kind of come back to those things. We can pick them back up when things change, or we may find that different things light that fire in us now than used to.
Absolutely. And I would say that myself. Like, I have grown and evolved over time. What I studied in college, my initial undergraduate is very different what I went to graduate school in.
Yes.
Like, I have evolved and changed, and what matters to me has changed. And
Yeah.
that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Like, that is what we
Absolutely.
we want to do that.
Yeah.
That shows growth and development. So
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
really appreciate so many of the thoughts that you had, Elizabeth. That, the fact that compassion fatigue is not just something that affects the helping profession,
Yeah.
but impacts all of us.
Yeah.
Because we are getting bombarded with information, and it can feel overwhelming.
Yeah.
I love that we talked about the numbing versus a distraction.
Yes.
And the distraction is actually a welcome thing.
Yeah.
And to get the memes from your sister,
Yeah.
I love that. I thought
Yeah.
that's brilliant.
Yes.
She's like, can I send you some memes that are not related at all?
Yes.
Congratulations.
Yes.
I love that. I love the reminder that good enough is good enough. And boy, I think we could use that in so many areas of our life. Like, it's good enough, and that's what we're going to do. And to honor ourselves when our gas tank is empty.
Yeah.
And to recognize, is this chronic? Is this happening chronically?
Yes.
If it is, then I need to evaluate. But
Yeah.
if not, then give ourselves some compassion and
Yeah.
back off,
Yeah.
and then come back at it. Something you said, I think before we even started the podcast, was that you changed professions into academia
Yeah.
because you recognized that chronically you were experiencing compassion fatigue. So you made an adjustment. And I love that you were self-aware enough to say, it's not working for me. I need to have more gas in my tank for the things I care about most.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love the reminder that self-care, and you called it what? Caring of self.
Caring for yourself. Yeah.
Feels a little bit better than
Yes.
the pop culture self-care.
Yeah.
But that it doesn't have to necessarily be a position of privilege. It can be how we manage our time, our sleep, our exercise. And then I loved how we ended with just seasons of life.
Yeah.
That there are going to be seasons where we have more to give, and there are going to be seasons where we don't, and to honor those seasons.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for your insights and thoughts. I think this question is something so many of us experience, and I appreciate our listener for putting it into words and writing in. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for being with us.
Of course. Thank you for having me and allowing me to share some of these things that I feel so strongly about.
I love it. I can tell it's your passion.
Yes,
So
yes.
wonderful. Well, thank you also for joining us today and for listening and tuning in. As I said earlier, I think compassion fatigue is something we all experience to one degree or another. So for those of you that are listening and thinking, you know, I have a family member, I have a friend that, boy, they've been experiencing this, please pass this on to them. It can be beneficial when we have understanding and language for these experiences that we have. Thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, take care. That's a wrap for today on the Therapist Question Box. I'm Lindsay Schiss. Thanks for listening. And remember, every question you ask is an opportunity to learn and grow. Brought to you by Therapy Utah.
Hey, this is Kathy Kinghorn. I'm an owner at Therapy Utah. If you'd like to book with one of our trauma-trained therapists, go to www.therapyutah.org. Thanks for listening.